It's meanwhile been 4 weeks since I moved here to Munich to intern at a script agency, and it's crazy how quickly time passes, right? I feel like I've just recorded the first video yesterday, but yeah, I think that's mostly due to, every day being basically the same because, in the morning I just commute to work, and then I spend my day there, and then I come back, and then I just fall asleep. So nothing crazy really happened in the last 2 weeks, and in my last video I already talked about a day at a script agency, like what are common tasks that are coming up every day, what's the nature of the work like, how creative is it really, and that's why I thought this time I want to talk about something more personal, which is concerning my own writing project, because I do slowly realize that something is happening in the way I perceive my writing and my writing manners as well, ever since I started working at the agency. So in this video I would really like to talk about the forging of characters, because I kind of noticed something in the last couple of weeks. What's kind of happening every day at the agency is I have to read newly sent in manuscripts to assess them dramaturgically, and something I've noticed is that especially newcomer authors haven't really mastered the craft of writing individual characters that you can actually differentiate from each other, and this is something that I don't think is very noticeable in novels as much as it is noticeable in manuscripts. This I really would like to discuss today because I think it's something that might also help people who have problems understanding their own characters and their story just in the novel form. And yeah, I kind of thought this would be a really interesting thing to talk about, so let's get into it. First, I want to say that I have not done any research on any narratological theories right now. I did attend a seminar last semester at university about narratology, but this video is honestly just an opinion piece. I'm not gonna really delve into like established theories and already falsified theories. Like, I'm just gonna talk about like my impressions of my own writing manners and how they've changed whilst also reading manuscripts. Because I think so little people are actually used to reading manuscripts, because I also had a problem at first when I started reading them. I was so very accustomed to like the literary form of a novel, where you would have like direct speech, indirect speech, you would have like thoughts in between, you would get to know the inner world of the character too. And here I think it doesn't even matter what kind of narratological situation you have, because even if it's an omniscient narrator or a personal narrator, you still have a different insight into the character's inner world in a book, in a novel, than you have in film. And this is something I haven't really noticed, because when you watch a movie, of course you have the actors and the actresses doing their job. So you don't just have a script and you kind of have to imagine everything that they do, their mimics, their gestures, their voice. You see it there, it's delivered to you. The actors are serving as a medium in that moment. Whereas when you just read the script, what I've experienced for the very least in the beginning was that it sounded kind of off, that there was just something missing, and I just didn't really know what that was until I have read the really, really good scripts, or I haven't had the feeling anymore that something was amiss. And in the last couple of weeks, I realized that this has a lot to do with how the characters are actually translated from the imagination of the writer onto paper. And again, this is something I don't think is too obvious in books or in novels, because there, the narrator is giving you insight into the character's thoughts, their opinions, their stances on certain things, their attitude. Whereas in film, everything has to happen through description. When you're watching a film, you won't have commentary, like there isn't a voiceover most of the time throughout the film telling you, by the way, this is what I felt in that moment when I found out this and that. Or this reminded me of something that happened 2 years ago when this and this person approached me and told me this and this and this. So in film, there's really very limited space to express things through direct speech, and you really have to fine-tune the speech to the characters that are saying the thing. What I've experienced in many scripts that were sent in by newcomer authors is that the characters don't have distinct voices. Many of them sounded exactly the same, and if you crossed out the name, like above the line that they were saying, Most of the time you couldn't even say which character just said that. I think this is why I was in the beginning very confused, because I didn't know how to read the scripts. And this made me realize something else, that I have never really thought about that before when I wrote myself. To me, my characters are crystal clear, right? I think every author, every writer, when they start writing a story, they kind of have a pretty clear picture of the characters they're trying to describe, they're trying to bring to life with their writing. I personally have been struggling with dialogue, for example. Every time I try to write dialogue in my novel, I'm feeling really awkward because to me, my characters don't have a voice, they can't speak. To me, they're just characters with an inner world. They're characters with motives. They're characters with attitudes towards something. But when it comes to speech, I seemingly can't bring them to life because to me they're still very abstract. To me they're not people, they're just characters. And I don't know if that's something that I simply never thought about or if it's a common issue, but now that I've been working at the agency for 4 weeks and I've basically every day been fed with, manuscript over manuscript, with dialogue situation over dialogue situation, good ones and bad ones, but also extremely well-written ones. I asked myself, what if I tried to write my novel into a script? How would that translate? And so I actually conducted a self-experiment and I tried to rewrite the first chapters of my novel into a film script to see who my characters actually are on the surface. And I've realized a few really interesting things. First, writing dialogue is absolutely hard. This is something that I've also not just realized while writing myself, but also whilst reading the sent-in manuscripts. Many dialogues feel very stiff. They feel extremely fabricated and unnatural, and for a reason. They don't reflect the character to the outside, they reflect what the author wants the characters to symbolize in that very moment to the reader or the people watching. And this is an issue that I think I also discovered with myself in my own writing. Sometimes I feel like the dialogues are pretty performative. They don't seem very real, they don't seem genuine in any way, and if I actually read them out loud, I would cringe really, really hard. With the scripts that I personally found extremely good, the dialogues didn't try too hard. In the moments that you actually sensed what a character was feeling wasn't just the dialogue, it was actually very, very subtle things. It was the way they said the thing. It wasn't about constructing like a spectacle out of the dialogue, it was more trying to find the nuances and set them in the right place for you to get a feeling about the character. Because in the end, I think human experience is extremely nuanced. I mean, many encounters feel very different, although our experiences align in so many ways. But I'm still thinking that the main thing that really distincts us from one another is the way we perceive and the way that we respond. It's not really in what we respond, but it's more about how do you respond to this, particularly. When I approached the dialogue section, I was kind of at loss, because in the book, you kind of just read it with the reader's voice, right? Like, saying something in your head sounds a lot better than saying it out loud most of the time, and so when you get to the script, you kind of have to think the other way around. What may sound weird on paper, but translates perfectly into speech. And then you will find very natural things, coming up in your mind, like someone at loss for words, someone trying to rephrase something again, somebody struggling to even respond in the first place, because this can also happen. Sometimes dialogue can also consist of silence. And this is something that you don't organically see in a novel. Maybe it's written, he says nothing, right? But in the script, you will have a very different imagination of the scene because it will feel more real, it will feel more physical even. So what I can really recommend to you if you're also struggling a bit with character building is just take half an hour, look at a scene from your book and try to write it as if it were a film. And then take notice of how you picture your character organically. Don't picture them as a mere character in a fictional world in a book, but picture them as an actual person, actually having physical encounters with other people and their environment. I think this format is just a lot more consequential in that way because you can't get lost in the language. There you don't have to really think about literary devices. You don't have to think about, you know, adding a sprinkling metaphor here and there. These kind of stylistic devices you don't need in a script. It's not about aesthetics in that moment, it's all about the human nuance of it. In the script, you're solely focusing on the very essential things that have to happen to make a character seem organic and natural, and this can be such a huge help for you to actually understand what you want to convey in that scene, you know? Like, what is crucial? Like, what do I really need in this specific scene to convey this and that feeling to the reader, or in general, the receiver? A script format kind of shows everything else that is not important and not relevant to the character development to the side. It just focuses on these very human nuances that have to be seen. And this is something that I will personally pursue because I think until now my characters are pretty flat, not in the way that, you know, they're all the same, but I think it's kind of a really big issue that you can fall into, that you think, well, I know my characters in my head, so of course I know how to translate them to the outside, but that's usually just really difficult. And here I think the film script format does do a really good job at navigating these kind of gray zones and to let you know where you still have to work on. I hope this kind of made sense because while recording I realized I kind of drifted from one point to another, but I hope I could make some kind of sense of this chaos and I hope you could too. For me, this personally is a great approach to really understand my characters better or to understand what they still lack, essentially. And I would love to hear your stances on that and what your solutions are to these kind of blocks and how you deal with getting to know your characters better or how to make them more authentic and what that even means, right? That's a whole different story. But for now, I really hope that was an interesting take on literature versus film and how these two mediums kind of also add to each other despite being so different. And yeah, I just thought that was super interesting to think about, and just talking about it also just made me realize I absolutely have to work on my novel again. And again, I would really love to hear your comments on that. So that being said, I really hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did, and then hopefully until next time. Bye!